But in our modern culture and technology, what we're doing is that we're losing that sensitivity. And we're depending on technology, overly so. And that environmental sensitivity has gone out the window. And with all the things that we're introducing to our environment, that sensitivity needs to return. And I don't mean in an adverse way, but to be conscious in terms of our relationship with all life and all of nature. I gave this little spiel at the UN meeting in October. But I think the underpinnings of this is that how can we effectively learn, educate in a body of knowledge that will start embracing a new way of thinking. Our guest, of course, is Cindy Sage. I just wondered to know her, what she's done with their bio-initiatives and research. Cindy?
Thank you, Bruce. Hello, everyone. I walked in today thinking we were going to have a continuation of a nice, really, like flip-flop and shorts kind of coffee. And then Bruce said, well, we might invite a few people. And then he said, well, it might be a good idea just to get slowed down on just film just a And so, I'm here today, my brain is spinning about the very best way to come and to talk to you. I don't know you yet, and I hope I will. I would like for you to know something about me and where I fit at the beginning, because I think what I'm bringing to this is different in content than what you as a group have been talking about. And I'd like for you to know why I got so motivated to come back to some of my original roots, professional roots, in ionizing radiation. It's not where I am now, but I'd like to have you know what my personal story is, because I didn't expect to be here today. I didn't ever expect to work on ionizing radiation again, but I am. So let me tell you about that story. But first, my husband and I have had an environmental consulting firm for more than 40 years. We're trained in the sciences. We've been in Montecito all of that time. We helped to start the environmental studies program at UCSB in 1970, and we are very blessed to have found a good niche where we can teach people more about identifying resources in the environment to protect, and about being smart about environmental constraints that should be guiding us in where we live and work and go to school. And this has been our business. It's what we teach. It's what we practice. And along the way, in what's been a very successful small business consulting, for-profit consulting profession, somehow we started working on this, now an old issue, of kids and power lines and cancer. And this goes back to the mid-'80s, you may remember. And we were trained in the sciences, doing lots of work for large corporate clients about the best value and utility of land, where you develop, where you don't, how you should be guided to respect and honor the environment and still live, lives and, grow smart, really. And that was the smart growth. And we got hooked into this business about looking at the effects on health of non-ionizing radiation. Not ionizing, but non-ionizing. That would be things like power frequency fields from power lines. That's where we started. And later on, we sort of got pulled into the radio frequency microwave aspect of this 10 or 15 years later, because as cell towers were being built, people were using cell phones, people were using cordless phones, baby monitors, all of these things. We were brought along to evaluate the science, the published medical literature on non-ionizing health effects. We got really good at this. We got really well known for doing this. And it was simply an outgrowth of doing what we did well, and that is doing science in the public interest and translating really complex scientific and public health subjects into language that the public and decision makers can actually use. That's what we're all about. That's what we've done for 40 years. That's what we've taught kids in universities to do. That's what we tell our clients we should be doing to live healthy and smart. And by smart, I don't mean smart meters. Not at all. So along the way, we got pretty good at, the message and packaging the message. And about 8 years ago, I was with colleagues at a bioelectromagnetics conference. It's the Professional Society for EMF, electromagnetic fields and radio frequency radiation. And a number of us who were really dissatisfied with the way in which standards seem to be very unprotective. Our federal standards are very not protective of public health. A group of us got together, sort of some of the real old guys who didn't have a lot to lose by being on the outside of the thinking box. And we decided that we were going to, with me as the center, sort of the hub, the wheel, the focus person who writes and edits, and we manage large teams of people. We always have, we write for a living. And so I thought, well, this is something I could do with my training. What I did was to say, look, if we can choose a luminary in every one of the fields that matters in looking at the health aspects of electromagnetic fields and radio frequency radiation, I know I can manage this team and I know I can write it. And I have no idea how we'll pay for it, but we'll do it. And by God, we did it. And what we did was to go entirely outside of the box and not peer review publish it. We said, we'll never get this through traditional peer review. They're going to kill us. And so what I did was to say, okay, let's just put it on the web. Let's just put it up for free. Let everybody in the world, all at one time, when we push the launch button, let them have it. And that goes outside the box of thinking. They can't squash us that way. They can badmouth us, right? We can be subject to international criticism of one kind or another, and I'm sure we will be. But so here it came. This is a 3-volume piece of work called the Bio Initiative Report, and it was put on the web in 2007. And it immediately became an international, what's a good word? Sensation is too big of a word. But it was very noteworthy in that we had millions of hits within a few months. And for a dry science report, this is amazing. If you want to know more about it, you can look at the back, and you can see that we were calling on people who were luminaries in their field, like Leonard Hardell, on brain tumors, the relationship of cell phones to gliomas and acoustic neuromas. We had Henry Lai from the University of Washington doing genotoxicity, effects on DNA, and neurology. And we had an expert on heat shock proteins and breast cancer and on and on and on. So that was our first big piece of international work. And then after 5 years, we updated this report, and it is now on the web as the Bio Initiative 2012 report, with new chapters added as we've needed them on fertility and reproduction, cell phone in the pocket affecting sperm motility, male fertility, women using cell phones during pregnancy, resulting in altered fetal brain development of the fetus, observable by the time that child is in elementary school, in terms of behavioral difficulties and learning impairments. We have this now in human children, and we have this in animal studies. So that was fetal and neonatal effects was vital. A third area that we provided massive new input was on autism and the plausible relationship between autism and autism spectrum conditions and EMF-RFR. And the fourth area was to look at all of the international scientific literature on blood-brain barrier effects, which is a really important way in which the adverse effects of radio frequency microwave radiation affect people in their brains. And once the brain is desynchronized, its neural synchrony is upset, you've got massive effects on the body. So, where I fit is in bringing large teams of people together internationally and knowing these people personally and having them write to the best of their ability, what do we know today, surveying all of the international literature, and then coming to some conclusions about what we should be doing today for prudent avoidance. All right, I've taken a few more minutes than I thought I would do to talk to you about this, but I think it's important that you know that my area for you, my technical expertise for you, is where we have this non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation that is really being rolled out in terms of wireless technologies. You know, and if you don't automatically know what all of those things are, they are cell phones, cordless phones, baby monitors, smart meters, which are absolutely devastating, all of these tablets that are coming out. Many of these things could be wired, and if they were wired rather than wireless, I don't believe we'd be seeing a fraction of the health effects that we are and the impairments. Now, if you now want to go all the way to the end of what are all the bad things that can happen to you by overexposure to these things, uncontrolled exposure, then I'd encourage you to come up, or we can pass these around. I reduced them down in a guest editorial for the journal Pathophysiology. I was asked to write one page about what it would mean if we didn't control the rollout of wireless technologies. And I was able to do it on one page. And I think if you take nothing more away today than that list, it's important. And they're right here, Carol, if you just like to pass.
This one?
Yeah,
Is the one
yeah, you're probably going to have to share, but you can pass it around. And if even one of these effects that we are seeing occur with uncontrolled exposure to non-ionizing radiation, if even one of those is true, then we should be putting the brakes on. But I will tell you, all of those things listed on this chart are effects of chronic exposure to very low intensity radio frequency radiation. So, you know, that tells you who I am and what I've done and where we fit. And I know I'm talking to an audience that's much more aligned with, we talk about ionizing radiation in Fukushima, and we talk about, what's our limit? What is the limit of the human genome to accept insult? What is the limit of the human being? What is the capacity to go without sleep, without nourishment of the body, without homeostasis in a way that allows us to live a normal life and reproduce in a normal way? Well, it turns out that I think the reason Bruce and Dick and others are inviting me here is to say, well, look, there is such a link. There are such similarities between the biological effects of non-ionizing radiation, my field, and your field, of low-dose chronic ionizing radiation from Fukushima. And my aha moment came in a very personal way. And I want to tell you that story. I wouldn't tell this to a big audience outside, but I will tell you because I think it's important for you to know why I'm so motivated to do work back in ionizing radiation. We have a couple of daughters. They grew up here. They went through all the local schools. One of them went off and got married and moved to Tokyo 5 years ago. And they had their first child in Tokyo. And of course, we all went over and we celebrated and we were, just loving the life they have. Wonderful for them. And along came Fukushima. And my husband and I happened to be down in New Zealand. We had just been all visiting there together, but the kids went back early to Tokyo. And we were just ready to leave New Zealand and fly back to Santa Barbara, and it hit. It hit on my birthday, actually. We were out for dinner at a lovely restaurant, coming almost on our way to the airport to come back. And here was this just devastating news. Now, we're biologists and geologists. We do a lot of seismic work. We did original work on 3 Mile Island. So as soon as I looked at CNN and I saw the isotopes, I was thinking, oh boy, this is really bad. And they had no information. They had email, but they couldn't get CNN. They couldn't get information. So I went to the computer at the hotel and I was up for 36 hours looking, and trying to communicate to them that they needed to get out. And it was such an emotional collision with my, what I have in my head scientifically and medically. And here you're dealing, you have kids, you have kids or grandkids, and you try and tell them things. It was necessary to be right about the level of concern they should have. And so we watched and we filtered and we fed to them information. And by the time we saw how bad we thought it would be, we asked them to leave. They were on the first bullet train out of Tokyo to Osaka. They got on an airplane to go to Singapore through Shanghai. And many of their friends who stayed on, and these are people in really responsible, business, finance, high-tech jobs, couldn't leave. They couldn't leave, or if they left, they had to go back for their jobs. So our kids were lucky. And they were able to resettle in Singapore. But, I wrote something on the way back on the airplane. And it's a letter that I wrote to Sam Blakesley. And I said, look, let me tell you what it feels like. I'm not gonna shout science at you, but I'm going to talk to you about what it feels like to be in that situation. And then, as I flew from San Francisco back to Santa Barbara, I looked down, this is like my 25th hour of flying. I looked down and I looked at Diablo, and then I looked at the 120 miles we have. And I thought to myself, okay, overlay the maps. What do we have here? Well, having worked on the Hosbury Fault and the seismicity of Diablo in our beginning days, in our young 20s, it was just so powerful a message that we can't do this. And I will tell you, I thought to the night, if you live here or you remember the fires that burned in the backcountry of Santa Barbara for a while, I hope some of you who are here in Santa Barbara remember when the big winds came up, the Santa Ana winds, months later, and they took all of that ash and they blew it over the mountain. We were sitting down at Playa Azul having dinner one night outside with the family, had margaritas out, and had sour cream on top of the enchiladas, and they turned black. They turned black. Now, this was only ash from a fire, but can you imagine with the airflow that we have, the ebb and flow, the on and off shore, and the big winds that come, we're 120 miles away. We can't live like this. We shouldn't live like, nobody should go through that. So I came home and I wrote the letter to Blakesley, and it's probably the best thing I think I ever wrote in my life because it's limbic and it gets to people. It informs them from the heart. You already know I'm smart. I'm a scientist. I write all this stuff. We downloaded 1 billion kilobytes of the Bio Initiative. People read us. But really what matters is what it does to families, and what it does to our living, what it does to our children and our grandchildren. And then I thought, oops, you're really over the line. You gotta put on that suit again and go back to court and be an expert witness. You have to be credible. You're really way out there. Your voice cracks, not good. So what did I do? I did something that's so mean. I wrote a professional paper, and I published it. It was actually invited, and it's one I want you to take and read here. And what's it about? It is about the intersection of your science and mine. And I think it's good. And it's new, it's a new idea. I had been working so long on non-ionizing radiation effects, and what we know is that these exposures at chronic low-dose levels cause DNA damage. Single and double-strand DNA breaks. Now, this is my science, okay? But I want you listening with your IR ears, okay? They cause failure of DNA repair, particularly in human stem cells. They cause allergic and inflammatory responses in multiple organ systems. They cause depressed immune function. They cause loss of adaptive response to infection and open the door for tumors and impaired mental function. Well, because in my turmoil with our family, like calling everybody I knew in Russia that had worked on Chernobyl, these are authors in the Bio Initiative now doing non-ionizing work, but the guy who was the chief medical officer for evacuating people and taking care of them after Chernobyl is Yuri Grigoriev. He's an author in the Bio Initiative, but in the old days, he was on Chernobyl. Read his memoir, published simultaneously with my paper on a memoir 6 weeks following Chernobyl. I mean, he had his own story and he wanted to publish. Well, anyway, I called Yuri and I said, what do I do about the baby? What do I, potassium iodide, what should I be doing? And from Russia, he was advising me for the family. At the same time, we're writing and writing and writing for the Bio Initiative, and I said, Yuri, I've got this echo in my head that everything I've gone back to read from the Chernobyl work that you gave me, all of your work, and Rosalie Bertel's work, and Burlakova's work, and all of these wonderful Russians that talked about what happened after Chernobyl with chronic low-dose ionizing radiation is exactly what we're seeing for chronic low-intensity exposure to wireless and to electromagnetic fields. They are absolutely the same. They have a little bit of different names for things. We call it electrohypersensitivity today, EHS, if you're sensitive to cell phones and wireless radiation. Well, the Russians and Yuri's work group called it radiosensitivity. And in radiosensitivity, they found that people who were living, for years after, in the zone still affected by chronic low-dose ionizing radiation, were having all these symptoms and all of these biomarkers for damage and all of the impairments to health and cognitive function that are absolutely identical to ours. And the effects are worse at low dose because the DNA repair for an acute exposure to ionizing radiation is apoptosis, kills a cell. You sort of beat the cancer risk a lot faster there and more efficiently, but with this chronic low-dose stuff, both for ionizing and non-ionizing, it's a slower repair, there's a lot more misrepair, and a lot more mutations passed on that may very well be just like de novo mutations that become important in autism. So where I've come to is an understanding that I'm not sure I can do this like we did it at coffee the other day, but we were sort of getting pumped up, on these ideas and saying, well, what does it mean then for first of all, what does it mean for Fukushima? If they can't avoid the chronic low-dose ionizing, they damn well better plan so they don't have a lot of wireless as well. Wireless you can control. This is a built environment. It's the restoration. It's the building back of their communities. They better go wired because that's one toxin, one environmental exposure that can avoid. And so we were sort of waving our arms up at Pierre Lafond over our coffee, talking about, okay, well, if we know that we're going to have global circulation of Fukushima radiation for a long time, this is really going to be tough, I think, to, we're going to have another body burden to deal with. So if you then think about all of those things you're doing voluntarily, your cell phone, your cordless phone, all of those, your iPad, all those gadgets that you use, your wireless router and so on, you are using up, in a cumulative fashion, you are using up your capacity for homeostasis and for maintaining quality DNA. The quality of your human genome that you live with and that you're going to pass on perhaps, we are finite in what we can do before we just fall down, right? And so let's deal in an intelligent way with reducing the exposures as a society that we can do. We can have internet another way, right? We can have wired internet. We can have lots of things that reduce our burden to wireless technologies, and we better start thinking about it. Smart meters have no place in the society. They are the largest rollout of an environmental toxin that I can think of because they go to every single building that's electrified in this country, and they're going in around the world. We could do this in another way. So my new worldview is that we've all done good science and it's available. We need to keep promoting the so what part of what we understand. And the so what part of what we understand is that chronic exposure to these things is cumulative and it's harmful, but a good portion of it may be avoidable. And we need to be able to look at precautionary actions and advocate for those in order that we're not going to be putting iPads in classrooms for school children, for example. A very large initiative that needs to be turned around. And I have a list of others that, I talk about. But that is sort of actually a long version of where I fit in this and what my interests are. And moving forward, obviously, I'm very interested in finding ways now to take it out of the text, the dry science area, and make it real for people. Make it tangible. Let them see and feel and smell and understand the issue, and make it limbic so it goes into the heart. It's not just up here. But I think it has to be a message that I'm not real good at. I'm a science kind of trained person, and I talk in numbers and papers and retreat into that. That's my comfort area. We need really good people who get to people in a visceral and limbic way to say, we could do this better. So I'm really excited to be working with you in a way that maybe allows me to give you what I know so you can take your message out.
Well done, thank you.
Yeah.
You want to read your little letter there?
Oh, I'll cry. It's
Yeah. If you feel.
Can I comment on that?
sure. But Bob, what?
Your comment is really, what you've said is wonderful, and I really appreciate that. My problem is, as a physician, I need biomarkers, because people don't get sick. 100% of function of a system, 0% function. You have to lose 80-85% of function, even up to 90% in some systems before there's a symptom. So they will look at me and say, well, I have wireless, but I'm fine. I have this, I'm fine. I use my cell phone, I'm fine. What are these 2 marks on my face? Oh, and there are 2 marks on this side too. Well, that's because you hold the phone like this. So,
You want biomarkers, we've got a good running list of them, and now what we need is physicians.
Yeah.
To be able to say, you want biomarkers, and you want to show somebody why they're feeling crappy, we can help you with that.
I want to get there before they feel crappy.
Yeah.
Because that implies they've already lost 70-80% of function.
Yeah.
Now they start to feel badly.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So we have to have markers that show things at the 75% still remaining, 25% loss instead of 80% loss. I need a marker.
Yeah.
So I can say, look, this is what's happening to you. Even like heat shock protein. Maybe we look at the heat shock, I'm just saying in general,
Yeah.
what you're talking about, they're never going to listen to, because we have to show them that there's damage even though they don't feel it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, Bob, is to show them by their environment, by some measurements. Like, we're doing Geiger counting measurements, and there's all these measurements now with regard to Fukushima.
Yes.
And Cindy's an expert on how to do the measurements too. Did you bring your
I did.
There's her version of Geiger counters for EMS. And one of the things we talked
We need
about,
model numbers so people can...
she's got all, she even has some, I think, on good deal, right? Ones that,
It is the tri-field meters, is that what you're doing?
Because my highest and best use in the end is really to go to court, be an expert witness. I mean, I've worked all my life to be good enough to go do that. I've done a lot of that. And so I have all the meters that are like top of the line, because I'm duking it out with industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to go to court, and whatever Southern California Edison uses, their experts use, I use. So we use a lot of meters that are probably overkill for people who want just a good, reliable meter, but we know a lot about it.
Okay, but some of the physicians need to have maybe even a rent-a-meter.
Yeah.
It's a little company rent-a-meter. And the doctor, somebody comes in and says whatever, and you say, okay, well, I'll meet you at your house with a rent-a-meter, and I will scan your house.
right.
And now that $30,000, $20,000 meter is provided by a company who just has these little rent-a-car, rent-a-meters, that you can go out and say, well, this is why your child is not sleeping.
Or call a service that'll do it for you, which,
Yes. Or a service.
like years ago, Cindy came up to where I live at Margaret's and did a survey. And we have no wireless anywhere in that house.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you can all do this. I mean, it's easy to access. Meters. Now, remember, you need 1 meter for power lines and bad wiring inside your home. And you need a different meter for radio frequency, microwave radiation for the cell tower. So, just understanding that, the spectrum is wide and you have to have different meters. But these are all becoming very affordable and accessible to people. And if you can make this, if you can make this visible to people, because you can hear the meter creating an audio sound for you that characterizes.
It's very similar to the Geiger
environment.
counter effect. You hear the noise.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
So again, whatever we do, we have to be able to help people understand there's an impact on your system, even if you don't feel it.
That's right. I think that's one of the main purposes of this.
When I went, a tiny story, when I first noticed this in my practice as a resident, I went into this room where they were doing called digital radiography, and they were actually injecting a little dye in the heart, and they were trying to measure the opening of the heart arteries with this dye without doing the surgery, without actually pushing anything in there. And I went, well, and I'd ask questions like, how bad is that patient? He said, oh, well, he has a 75% block in 2 arteries. And I would talk to the patient, and the patient had no symptoms of any kind. So years later, I'm in my office right here in Santa Barbara, and this first man comes in the first 3 days of my new practice, and when I came back in 2004, he's a 46-year-old man. Comes in, he says, my dad died at 52, my brother died at 48, and I'm just very worried. I work out in the gym an hour and a half a day. My heart rate goes up to 165, 180. I have no symptoms of any kind. Could you just check me out? I said, okay. So we did an EKG, and he already had a heart attack he never felt. So I said, you have option A is you go to the Cottage Hospital and they put the wire in and they do the angiography, or you go to UCLA to the special scanning system they have down there in Culver City, and they'll put a little dye in the arm, and they can have a special computer program that can actually separate out all the movement and tell you what's going on. So he goes to LA and he gets this dye injected. 12 seconds later, it's in the heart, and it says that he has a 95% block in the right coronary artery. He works out every day in the gym, an hour and a half. This guy has 280 pounds, 6'2" football. He's a pro football guy, right? He gets on the phone, he says, Doc, it's terrible news. I have a block in my right coronary artery. I said, yeah, that's the bad news. What's the good news? He said, what do you mean good news? What good news is there? I said, the good news is you have not had your heart attack. There's no damage. Now take your time. He had no insurance. Find the cardiologist that you like and let him put the wire up there and do what he has to do, which he did 2 weeks later. Issue is that there's no damage. If you can't feel it, we can't sell it.
Yeah. I'm going to make one suggestion. It's pretty much out of my box, but there's a man, some of you may know, who's a longtime practitioner, MD, by the name of Leon Hammer. And I found that he heavily quoted our bioinitiative report in the paper that he wrote. And we got in touch, and I said, you're practicing Eastern medicine, you're alternative medicine, and you're doing something called the Chinese pulse, which frankly I've never heard of.
Pulse diagnosis.
Yeah, pulse diagnosis.
Because the human body has a reflex.
Yeah,
It
and he was sort of legitimizing, I guess, part of he was acknowledging our work on the effects on the human body that are very negative, and he was saying, I get all these people in my practice who come in and they are so messed up from using their cell phone perpetually or their wireless devices, and he said, my diagnosis is through the pulse, and I can tell who the cell phone addicts are, and if that's part of their problem. So it was one more tool in the arsenal. Blood, saliva, and all the others, they're all good. But I agree with you.
Okay.
I want to kind of bring those two thoughts together because Vanessa,
Could you project your voice for that?
yes, I get to see lifeblood as a hobby / practice. And I'm doing what I call bioprospectica, homeostatic regulators, which is sort of working from a spirit-body cellular perspective. I'm conscious live blood coach. So we're inviting the cells to communicate. But in the process of over this very last intense 4 or 5 year period, I'm beginning to become sensitive to the ectoplasmic energetic field that's in their spiritual dimension showing up in the cell. That, I mean, I've been reading the blood enough to start listening to the membrane integrity of the red blood cell and the balance in the plasma, the water, whatever those anomalies or whatever's showing up as well, and the communication between white blood cell, so the intelligence of the immune. So I'm beginning to get a palatable notation, which is outside of the box that MDs require, markers, and there's nothing that has peer-reviewed, standardized, whatever. What we're reading in each person's field, because it's like stickies, those little paper stickies. It's all over your field. And so I'm reading all those notes in the blood. So how do I say to, I just flew from St. Louis, Missouri, where I worked with a hospice nurses team, who after their whole clinic said, we are changing our investors. Because they're invested into the medical system and they want to go into wellness. But, you know, whatever they decided. But the point was, I'm looking at their blood a couple years ahead of what's going to manifest in their body. So I'm seeing things and I ask, okay, are you a soda pop drinker? Yes. Okay, tell me about that. Let's talk about that. It comes up that this is a 3 Mountain Dew drinker a day.
Sure.
Okay, free radical damage everywhere. And then reading in there all the wireless activity. I mean, you're talking about people on McDonald's for breakfast with, you know, chemtrails and Wi-Fi, and add your microwave on top of that. So I don't know what kind of standard or what kind of way we can talk from the it's not known yet, it hasn't been defined yet as what those levels are, that can actually help people pre the embodiment of whatever that's going to manifest to be.
Well, what do you do in the interim though? You know what we do? Look, you know, I just wrote a gigantic paper on autism and EMF, but and we had to do it to be legitimate in the eyes of people who are going to read us. But what we did was to condense everything that we know today about what would be smart to do down to one page. We have an advice to parents of children with autism. We have an advice page to parents of school-aged children about the use of wireless. One page. It is possible, and it's smart to say, all right, come on, you know, let's grind to the end and say what we can say today is intelligent for now and be ready for mid-course corrections. So I tend to look at it as something that we can do. I mean, I know you can find a way to build this into a practice where you're advancing the knowledge, but at the same time, you're not waiting until the end, when you're certain. You're willing to say, hey, we can make some changes. And we can tell our friends about making some changes.
Well, I find that prevention is key to preventive medicine. I'm Jennifer Anderson, and I find that preventive medicine is really the practice and education. So when I hear Vanessa say that somebody's drinking Mountain Dew, I automatically go with my educated background, and I think, well, when you look at the breakdown of what Mountain Dew is, besides the most obvious, it is a flame retardant. And so when we can take, there's an ingredient in it that's a flame retardant. And so when we can really look at the truth of what's in these products and in these tools that people are using and really educate them very clearly, I mean, that is just astonishing for people when they realize what they're really drinking, and not just the things that leach the minerals and the vitamins out of their bones, which is the carbonation factor, but that other added ingredient in it. So just knowing the difference.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
I got a question for you. So I'm not a scientist, I'm probably going to mangle part of this, but I think what I'm hearing you say, bringing Fukushima in, is that we have radiation levels in our society from all this wireless technology that's relatively new, but that is basically past medical muster. And what you're saying, it does damage, but now because of Fukushima, we're overloaded, and now this is a different realm we're in. This wireless stuff is actually going to start showing up symptomatic and start to kill us.
Co-carcinogens, yeah.
Yeah. So Fukushima plays into this
Yes.
by adding onto the load.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I think also that allows us to get people's attention because people are paying attention to Fukushima, and if we can spread that message to non-ionizing, we can get their attention.
Yeah, the thing is, I want to make a comment here because I brought this up at the UN meeting. I think from a standpoint of science, we have to enter a realm where we need new testing methodologies to test. And I don't know if Cindy knew, I never had a chance to talk to Cindy about it, but when we had the UN meeting, I mentioned Fritz Popp in Germany, who was literally with this very, very powerful photomultiplier, was measuring the interaction of the biochemical changes of a living cell, which produces a certain amount of light. And if you support a cell with the proper nutrition, oxygen, and everything else, there's a light emanation from this minute amount of light coming from the biochemical interaction within the cell. And it's a theory amongst a number of people that maybe that is one of the testing methodologies. I have also, in my excursion in alternative medicine, had seen some phenomenal testing tools, which I'm certain wouldn't pass the muster of Scientific American. But even in New York, when I was there living in New York, we had a special device with a camera, and it could change an environment in the cell, and we literally could photograph the energetic field in the human body and see the emanation of a cancer tumor develop in a person's neck way before any conventional kind of testing. So I've run into this a number of times. The search for new testing tools, and I think this is probably going to come out of the Soviet Union and other countries, maybe not the United States. But we needed other ways of testing for this. Even Vanessa was seeing clusters in various groups in the blood tests when you're doing some of the radiation stuff. So the indicators are there, it's just that they haven't quite entered into the realm of, I would say, what's called acceptable science. But I've personally seen some of those tools. And they work.
can I make an input?
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I did want to come down here is that, there was a big fear last week about the steam leakage from Fukushima's reactor site number 3. One side said there was just plain water, not bad. The other side tries to evacuate the West Coast. One of the problems that we have, and if you look at what I call nanotechnology now, that's where the hottest area in science is nanotechnology. What I really find really difficult we're getting symptoms now of radiation and whatnot, but we don't have the Geiger counter I bought one with Dick, and we all ordered one the other week because I'm figuring that the food chain is going to be hit pretty soon, and we already noticed this in some Colossian milk coming in from Arizona. But the idea is this nanotechnology radiation, which we call the micro-radiation, which is probably the most lethal because it dissipates through the tissue system and whatnot so quickly as opposed to a large particulate. When we do a radiation Geiger count meeting and say, oh, we have only this, we have one big particle. We took the most expensive spectrographic Geiger count system available about 2 years ago, did some research on it. What came through as a lethal plume that came through from a satellite explosion that came through Southern California, which was lethal. People died from it. It only does one little blip, and that's plutonium. We couldn't get a gradient measure of the nanoparticle. This is, to me, the greatest area of concern, is that we may take a Geiger counter and whatever they pick on Geiger counter, maybe multiply by 10 or 20 times at the nanoparticulate level.
Yeah, Yvonne, if I could comment, that's absolutely true, because when you have a particle in your body, it's like, I may talk later about measurements I've been making. Like if you go down the ocean and you want to measure radiation in the ocean, well, the ions that are dissolved in the water is a shield in itself, so you can't really measure the water, you have to sort of dry it out and measure the residue. Well, just think about a particle in your body, it's shielded by the body. However, so the Geiger counter and even gamma scans and all that, some new gamma scan, whole body scanners aren't bad. But bioassay is probably the way to go, the urine, the blood, the biomarkers.
But we have 2 or 3 intuitives here.
Can I talk about biomarkers briefly?
Yeah,
A little bit about that.
So one of the major problems that you see when you're looking at just biomarkers themselves is there's a lot of different chemical contaminants or heavy metals or radiation that are going to affect the same thing as a biomarker. So you can't tell what the source of the contaminant is.
Right.
So looking at your environmental contaminants and actually measuring your environment is a lot easier to do and a lot more tangible today and a lot quicker for us to get to than trying to develop a whole range of biomarkers. Looking at things like radioactive heavy metals, looking at organic chemicals, looking at even nanoparticles and metal oxide nanoparticles, these are all things that are very real today, and there's a lot of different techniques to do it. I think, and there's a lot of groups doing that. So I think some of it is getting those groups together and creating communities of experts who understand all those different techniques, bringing the price point down where the monitoring can happen more frequently in people's homes, offices, and where they spend their time, and getting that information out in a way that's accumulated and available to people is really important. Biomonitors will come, but it'll be a much longer process to go through the regulations of defining a specific biomonitoring process or a single molecule that's affecting something in your body that's coming from a specific contaminant.
Yeah.
There's so many. I mean, we talk about autism, we'll look at brominated in your pillows.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll come across in many different places where you'll have disrupting elements.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing that works really well. If you think that you're sensitive to wireless radiation, you can wear a Holter monitor, which measures your heart rhythms. And there are about 20 to 25% of people who were tested in one small project that I know about went into very rapid tachycardia. I mean, their heart rate and rhythms were completely changed during the time that they were exposed. And this was double-blind, sham and real exposure. And you could turn the effect on and off on a Holter meter. Now that's a pretty good level of evidence that your body is very sensitive to wireless radiation. It's one thing that works and it's very specific apart from all the others. So I'm hoping we'll find more.
How do you spell that?
Holter. It's a standard test for heart arrhythmias. If you have a cardiac problem, they hook you up to this thing you wear home for 24 hours and then they download it and look at the graph.
Are there well-developed tables of what magnitude of electric field or electromagnetic field and frequencies that people are sensitive to? We were talking a little bit earlier that it's a major fact that there are 3,000 volt per meter type fields out around airports.
3,000 volts per meter.
3,000 volt.
Okay, well, the bioinitiative recommendation is 0.6, so there's a nice comparison.
And you
From radar.
You can check me out. I try to work with facts, but
Yeah.
you can go to Google and
Yeah.
look up mill standard 464,
Yeah,
and it has them in there. We have to test those in airplanes.
yeah,
It shocked me when I saw that kind of a number out there.
yeah,
Much bigger than what you get out of a cell phone.
yeah.
Much bigger than what you get out of just about anything else.
Yeah,
But those are floating around in the atmosphere, and it's just at airports, it's right here. We got it right now.
And what are they?
It's the electromagnetic radiation from radars.
Radar.
Yeah. If you just look at the cancer rates and rates of neurological disease around military installations with radar, for example, as well as airports, you're going to find the same pattern.
You just brought up a quite interesting point. This happened some years ago, and I don't have anywhere near the background that Cindy did, but we were called in very simply to do some tests at NORAD Defense Command headquarters in Thunder Bay. And it was just checking for lighting. We had a Catherine ionometer. We had a few other, because this is kind of funny, tragic and funny at the same time. They had virtually almost 20% higher illness rates in the guys that monitored whether the missiles were coming over from the Soviet Union and give the orders for the red phone than they had in other places. And we found, I kind of wrote up a report and I said, you have an excellent environment for electronics, but a lousy environment for the people that have to work with it. And of course, at that time, this is going way back in the 70s, a lot of this testing gear just wasn't even available. But we could see it there. We could also see it in, I'll tell you another condition is that was the National Research Council of Canada, and it was a test that we did when they were doing tests for laboratory rats, and they were doing they were trying to test for different types of foods for a cold weather adaptation. And we obtained 3 different total results from the different batches just by the different rooms and the levels of interference, you would call it. We were mostly measuring for negative ionization. But the thing is that we could see in different rooms and whether the had full fluorescent lights on or what have you. But there were significant differences, and it was a big test they were doing, and they had split up into 3 units just because of rooms and logistics. So I saw the environmental problems. We had a saying in Canada, if you couldn't keep the plants alive in your office, doesn't it say something what you're doing to the people that were occupying?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone who is knowledgeable about RF engineering as a resource
You
person?
mean other than me?
I don't know you, but tell me if you are.
Well, I've been involved with electromagnetic testing for a lot of years.
Okay.
Always inspect airplanes. I'm
Yeah.
avionics guy.
Okay, that's really important. I can tell you that I'm always looking for people who can, give us real good technical.
Yeah, and part of my question that I didn't get answered, that it came out more as a statement than a question, is do you have tables on the amount of damage as a function of frequency and magnitude?
Oh, do we
and
have
time?
tables? Lots and lots. Yeah, we've done, what you're going to expect and what you're going to find from the data we have may not be coincident. And that is that it is the lower, frequency is not as important in this as is the modulation, the delivery of the signal. For start, square wave is worse than continuous wave. Pulsed or square wave is worse than continuous wave.
It's square wave, and that implies frequency has an aspect to it.
Well, now you may be able to help in our thinking there. Generally, if you go through all the papers there are on genotoxicity, what you will find is that the division comes not on frequency, but on the way the signal is delivered biologically. Anything that is a woodpecker form of digital on-off square wave is worse biologically. And the second thing you need to remember is that it is the very weak field effects that trigger biological oscillators that are in the body. These are our natural biological oscillators. Think of them as the pacemaker cells in the heart, for example. You have very high sensitivity to very low signal, low intensity, whatever it's going to be, whatever frequency and delivery method. And this is non-intuitive. We have a bimodal system to be looking at for dose. And we have the same problem that you in the IR field do. And that is that, the standards are based on the thought that more is worse, linear dose-response relationship, so these weak fields shouldn't have any effect, whether it's IR or non-IR. And they do. They're worse. And they're worse for some very good reasons. So when you go to doing tables for people, we prefer not to try to concentrate on a table of frequencies. But there's a beautiful chapter I want you to see in the Bio Initiative on modulation. It is all those factors together in a way that you can think about it, and then maybe you can apply that to your own professional work as a guide. But what you can't do is discount these very exquisitely low subtle energy
Have
frequencies.
good references to deal with those kind of issues?
Yes.
I haven't found that.
Biologically, yes, but in terms of the RF engineering part of this, it's always been a gap because the industry pretty well controls that.
And I react a little bit when you begin to talk wireless, because if you send everything over wires,
Yeah.
first thing it does is radiate from those wires. So
Well, it
the wires
does, but
won't help us
look
that
at the
way,
attenuation.
going wireless versus wires.
Yeah. Well, boy, but what a difference in terms of what you'd have in this house if you had wired versus wireless. I mean, and you can shield cable.
We can shield it, and it's a different game entirely, because
Well-
most houses don't have shielded cables.
Right, well, we have no business putting radio frequency over electrical wires. They were never made for it. When Cox comes to your house and they put in cable, they're putting in shielded cable. They don't want to lose the signal. They don't want it leaking out everywhere. So that's a nice shielded cable. The problem is that Southern California Edison gives us crappy electricity, absolutely full of radio frequency pollutants, and they don't have shielded cable. Our wiring, our distribution grid was never meant to carry All of these radio frequencies that are now traveling as pollutants along their lines
Well, they use it
and
for
into your
monitoring.
house.
They use those high frequencies for monitoring the lines now.
Well, they do that, but
For
they're also picking everything else up in the air.
Sure.
If you come down to my house and you get a really sensitive radio frequency meter, and you take it and you hold it to an electric outlet anywhere and turn it on, you don't get very high numbers for the radio frequency part of this. What you hear is radio stations playing on my wires and on my rebar.
Sure.
You can pick out KDB, you know? And this is a condition the analog to this would be that your water district over 20 years gives you increasingly polluted water to drink. They don't filter it at the filtering stations. They let everything in and they simply sell you dirtier and dirtier water every year. Well, that's what the utilities are doing, electric utilities. What you're getting today is not pure power frequency, electricity frequency. You're getting a whole bunch of other stuff you don't want. And you can hear it with the proper detectors.
And that's what led to the question, are the frequencies that damage people well documented?
Well, it's pretty much all of them. Well, I mean, in certain cases,
Hard to get rid of all of them.
in certain cases, actually, this is a really, there's a subtle part to your question, and let me see if I intuit it. All of the people we talk to in government, and particularly industry, tell us that they're in compliance with the current FCC standards. They're thousands of times below the standards, so they're in compliance, i.e. safety. Well, of course, it's not safe at all, and today we know that. We have the bodies in the streets, so we do know that. But if you're looking at the ability to change people's minds, do you give them all of the health damage studies and you stack them up like we did in the bio initiative, or do you twist it and say, did you know there are a lot of applications of non-thermal, very low intensity, non-ionizing radiation things we do to people that are FDA approved that treat bone healing. They improve bone healing. You turn it around and say there are therapies that we use that shouldn't work at all, right? Because they're so low. But they work for bone healing, wound healing, depression, and many other things, even some cancer treatments. So what we're doing is saying there are therapeutic applications of EMF and wireless technologies, but boy, you have to know what you're doing. But what is it? It's proof of concept they're biologically active. And if they're applied indiscriminately, like we're doing with wireless everywhere, that's like an indiscriminate medical treatment every hour of the day, every minute. Try an airplane, try an airport. Rich environments for medical experimentation gone mad. But they can heal, if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, good point. And they can harm if you don't do what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's the ectoplasmic residual I'm talking about. Carrying radio stations through the electricity, but also filling it in the ether of the cell. And actually, Bruce, just to correct what I was seeing during solar flares at, I think, a solstice or an equinox. I was at the Ojai Foundation, and we were doing a live blood clinic, and several different people from different walks were showing up with sort of what I would call poor digestion. The term I used to look at it was just poor digestion on the cell. It's trying to, plump up.
You're exactly right.
But yeah, so this was like, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not diagnosing or treating, we're simply observing the, your red blood cell is 7.2 micron in size. It's stamped out like a cookie cutter. It has no nucleus, it has its membrane, that's its whole deal. So if the membranes are acting like, whoa, I just swam, a marathon or whatever, that they look like they're coming out of the water like, ugh.
The ion channels that go from the outside of the cell into the inside of the cell are highly electrically sensitive. And what we know today is that calcium ion channels and potassium ion channels are completely messed up under the influence of wireless radiation at low levels with chronic exposure. So mitochondrial dysfunction is a really important thing for those of you that know a little medicine. The mitochondria within each cell are the little powerhouse that give you energy. And if they're not able to get what they need through a properly functioning, it's sort of an on-off switch in these ion channels. This is how all life works to make a cell function. It can't feed itself. It can't hydrate itself. And it's the cell membrane that is really the site of, we've known for a long time, it's the site of activity of wireless radiation. And the damage comes from simply wearing the system down so it can't function.
Yeah. There's an actual algorithm for the electromagnetic connectivity between the urine, the interstitial tissue, kidneys, and saliva, taken in concept with your breath rate. There's a mathematical formula that will give you that pH of that blood. But Bruce had mentioned light, looking at light in people, and I just found out that the COPD therapy is laser. It's reading the saturation of oxygen in the body. So I personally want to create or have an inventor, patents for me, because the scope that I'm working with actually refracts light, right? So that it's like if you take a piece of wood and you cut it and you turn it, you can see all the grain in it. That's the dimension we're looking at the live blood. And so if I could get like a DVD player that just pulls up a screen and the person can take a sample of their blood, but it has to be done, that's actually the pudding or whatever you say. The part that has to be done so tenderly so you don't traumatize the cell. But then just go in and have it refracted in some sort of technological book, so then we can just actually see it. But at the same time, again with markers, a lot of times when people are healing, markers are higher, because they're dumping into the field what needs to be eliminated. So if you get higher markers, sometimes you're on a bend for returning to homeostasis. So it's not exactly, it can't be driven. There's so many variables in how to read that moment of whatever your technology is going to be, or other.
I want to make a comment on this because I have a background in alternative medicine. One of my cousins, Mats Bloomberg, in Stockholm, was Sweden's leading health engineer. And Mats, in my trips to Stockholm, would show me how great the concern they had within the corporations over there. You talk about coax, there was everything examined to the nth degree about any kind of artifact signals, anything. I would go into the composing room at Express, the major newspaper there. I've been around enough electronics and big command centers and stuff. I mean, you'd feel like you're walking through a microwave oven. You go to Sweden into the Express office, you think you're walking outside in that grass out there. There's just absolutely no feeling, everything. They adapted flat screens and everything else really early on, and they were very protective. And their bottom line in Sweden was just better business sense, healthier employees. Everybody has a better disposition. It's we make sure they get access to natural light. It's just common sense. And heck, whatever we spend on what we're doing, it doesn't begin to cost anywhere near as a 20% increase in illness rates in the employees. I mean, to at least the organizations I know in Sweden, it just made common sense. It wasn't anything mandated, or there wasn't this kind of like fight that goes on between regulatory and insurance and corporate profits and God knows security analysts and everybody else. It just was a common sense the way they did things, and you really felt it in the environments that you're in.
Yeah, actually the U.S., some of the companies in the U.S. adopted the Swedish TNO. It was a 2.5 milligauss, so many inches from your computer. That was the Swedish standard, and it was implemented by some companies here very quickly. I'm not sure they played up that angle because they also sold devices that weren't quite so safe.
Yeah.
But I wish we'd seen more of that.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Has anyone looked at any changes in lipid composition in the membranes?
Yeah. Well, it's studied because what we know is that that's the real site of activity where you go looking for change, and it's very vulnerable. So it's got promise, but mostly what I know is that there are a lot of people who are writing about this say this is like one of the key areas where damage appears to be occurring. It's sensitive, so we should know more about it.
On the limbic part of the brain, is that what you said?
No, the
The
lipid part.
lipid composition,
part,
the
lipid.
composition, the composition. So
Oh, the
your
membrane.
membranes have different
Yeah,
compositions of lipids. And that would be a place where you can find a distinct biomarker if you're looking at changes in that composition, because it's pretty conserved across different people
So,
and across different species.
This is a very new thought, this is an important thought. You've now taken our conversation somewhere new and important.
Is the bonding of different proteins and lipids, is that what you're referring
No,
to?
the composition of the lipids in your membranes, they're
Of the
pretty
cell
conserved.
membranes.
Yeah, and so that would be a place where if you do see distinct changes, you'll be able to notice it and
Is that more high powered? I'm seeing lipids in the field, in the blood, in the plasma, not.
You couldn't do it visually.
No, I mean on scope.
Yeah, you couldn't do it with the scope. For what you're trying to do for visualizing cells, there is technology available for that, for visualizing that. And we can look at cells and look at, as long as we've trained the machinery, we can look at cells and visualize them and see different organics, we can see different methyl groups that way with it, and I can visualize that. That equipment costs about $200,000.
Yeah, I'm speaking more specific to the actual, in the membrane of the red blood cell or in the actual plasma
Yeah,
field.
you won't be able to see that with a scope.
So, got it.
You'll actually have to do a lipid extraction and then chemically analyze that
But
extraction.
the lipids are in the water is what I'm asking.
No, the
On the
cellular membrane is what we're talking about.
Okay, well, the white blood cells, but I can't.
You know, on a macro scale, the test that Alan Seichi does on, it's called BIA, bioelectric impedance analysis, actually measures the integrity of the cell membrane. But it's on a bulk scale. I don't know if it'd be sensitive or not. But there's a thing called phase angle, and when you're having problems, that phase angle changes.
It measures if there's a heavy chemtrails, when you can actually see the BI scores collapse or go down, or if there's a toxicity or something like that, or radiation hit or solar flare, it directly affects the cell membrane filtration. And the pass-throughs to, like I said, calcium and all the elements that go through the membrane, whatnot, is actually, what I was going to say, one of the things that you were talking about, is you cannot hydrate unless you're in homeostasis. That's what puts you in homeostasis to get you to hydrate.
This is my fourth glass of water, by the way. I'll be leaving shortly. That way.
Cindy, would you like to kind of, in terms of this meeting, kind of focus on what our objectives, what we'd like to get out of this meeting, in terms of what you explained to Dick and myself?
Well, the first thing I want to do is just say thank you for having an interest in listening to somebody who's really coming in from a side door. So I want you to know how much I appreciate that. And I'm going to learn a lot from interacting with you. But what Dick and Bruce and I talked about the other day was the opportunity to bring people together who need to talk together. And much of my work has been international. Much of my work was well received with the European Environmental Agency. Imagine if the US EPA, top guy, became an author for the Bio Initiative. Well, it wouldn't happen in a million years in this country, but it did happen in the European Union. Because they know that if they don't take care of their people can't pull them out of recessions and depressions. They're not resilient societies economically if they're sick. And over there, there's a better connection between the health and wellness of their people and how the government decides to spend its money that we don't have here. So my thought was to take this conversation further down the road by bringing over David G., who is the just retired, but the Deputy Director of New Sciences and Technologies, who has written the most amazing book, some of you probably have seen, called Late Lessons from Early Warnings. First volume was a few years ago, the second volume is now out. And this doesn't just look at non-ionizing radiation, but it looks at many of the environmental and medical challenges that we have had globally. And it talks about where we didn't listen early enough. BSE and lead in gasoline and DEX and on down the line. And by God, they added a chapter in the Late Lessons 2 volume on mobile phones and brain tumors. And they've made it visible. So my suggestion, since David called me up and he said, I'm coming over to promote Late Lessons. Do you think you could have a little get-together? Could you just, in Santa Barbara, could you have a little get-together? We're going to do this all around the country there to promote this for decision makers to say, this is our way. It's better than your way, maybe, if you should think about it economically, given your healthcare costs for chronic diseases. This is our model. It's a model based on precaution. We have enough evidence to act. The question is, are we going to act based on precaution? Or are we going to act when we have scientific certainty, which is something the industry defines, right, in every toxin area? So my idea was this. Could we find a group of people that would be willing to host David to come over, and maybe there would be a few speakers. Yuri Grigoriev, I mean, this incredible man from Chernobyl, now the head of the Russian Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and a luminary, would probably come along if you could pay his expenses, to form a nucleus of people to say, this is an important message, we'd like to help give it visibility here. So I floated the idea, and I think that there's merit to expanding the conversation, particularly if you have a couple of really good experts, and then you have people who are translational about what does it mean today? What can we do with this today? And how would it affect decisions that we're all making monthly about personal choices and also about what we do in our schools for kids, what we're doing, you know, for national mandates for energy conservation. Hey, everybody wants energy conservation. We just don't want it to kill us, you know? Let's just not do it wirelessly. So these are choices that are happening right now, and we're not affecting the outcome very well.
What was David's last name?
G-E-E.
That's it.
David G-E-E. Yeah, he's delightful. He's a generalist. Now, I've presented our work at the Royal Society of London twice. The Bio Initiative has been invited, we've presented twice. It's a big deal. I've been before the European Union, I've been before the EEA, I've been before their expert committees, been to the Scandinavian countries, and 500 and 600 people will show up, many of them in government and education and healthcare, to learn, and then they go home and they do something about it. And we're hoping here, maybe, you know, maybe we could make a dent.
The challenge is taking this information from a platform that professionally people have access to. It's like in one of our meetings we had, and the person will go unnamed at the moment, very prominent position in town, came to the meeting and openly admitted, he says, I know nothing about radiation. But also too is how do we channel this information, you know, into documentaries, into infographics, and ways that people understand and start to think differently. This is challenging. I come background from advertising, where you had to explain it in 30 or 60 seconds. So I know that route. But as a platform of a body of knowledge and trying to enter into a more sustainable and more life-supporting era in the future, also the challenges for the communicators, and the communicators also in this room. You know, Dan, you organize conferences at the university on medicine, some of the biggest ones they've ever had. Mark is over there is handling the not only documentary on the Gulf oil spill, but also the medical problems that people are facing from the Gulf oil spill. All of you in this room have come here with unique talents and insights, and so it's how can we make this happen? I'd like to also have everybody's email address and one under a list, everybody in this room, if you don't mind. So how can we do this? I pose that to you because we'd like to, as the saying goes, come away from here with our sleeves rolled up. Would that be a good term?
Yeah.
And everyone here is unique talent, so we'd like the future of the earth thrive. You know, not just be so sick we can't enjoy it. So.
I don't want to be a realist, but you know, the #1 challenge that all of us face, and if we were sitting in a room for 2 months, we could get a lot done. but it's monetary resources to make
Yep.
not only what you think about happen, but to implement what ideas come into place.
Yep.
And it's not a small amount, it's not gonna just be people's salaries, it's the monetary input to actually, build things, build equipment if you need to, mobilize people to bring them places and get them to communicate to each other. You know, as well as I do, that the film and media industry is not a cheap industry to run, so you need monetary resources for that. And so you're talking about a budget, that's a very real world way to start with it, is saying, well, how much money do we need to actually make this happen? Because that's gonna be your number one block. Because we can put our own time and energy, but there will be a stop in where we are able to do that just in our own monetary resources or our own time that is limited by monetary resources.
Well, it's marketing, first the budget, and then a test market perhaps, gathering emails, maybe with all the physicians and people that know people that know people. And
I imagine you would pull a lot of people in from the American Academy and bring them on this, and because I just lecture those people, and boy, are they smart. They already get it. So there are a few medical groups I would think that you might market to, but generally, I mean, this could be as small as a gathering like this at a few homes where David would come and maybe Yuri would come and they would talk, and they would form a collective to exchange information. And what you would find is that you would have linked people who are active in spreading the message, and whatever you develop, they use whatever they have developed, you have access to. And it's been very powerful for us to do that outside of all the normal channels. So it could be small. It could be larger if you had money enough. You can rent a hall. You can pull 400 or 500 people into the DoubleTree, and you can reach a larger audience if you choose to do that. But I would hope you would do as much as to say, give us the dates when he'll be here. There's probably a budget of, it probably wouldn't be more than $10,000 or $15,000 to pay for their part of coming west and the hotel, or maybe they'd be put up in private homes. But the exchange is what's important.
Well, and I absolutely agree. Like, anytime you get people to communicate from different disciplines, you come up with real solutions. My frustration over the years has been, I'm in rooms like this all the time where amazing solutions come to light, people know how to do it, there's no money to go forward as a community to work together, there's no money after that step to move forward and actually put it into implementation. And so I would really like to see something where we not only communicate, come up with solutions, but we find some real world action that goes into place.
Amen.
And so
Yeah,
I want to see
agree with
that budget all the way through.
Well, Butter was recently in Okinawa and had a group like this of senior scientists from all over the world. Getting them put together so they're going to do something is a major challenge.
if you had 200 people at $50 a piece, that's 10,000.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal.
Well, I'm not here to define the scope of what's possible, but I'm just here to introduce an idea that can be scaled either up or down, but it's an important step.
I have something simple. It's, with Facebook, there's a recent group that Bruce and I just joined called Fukushima Research Group. And we could start our own if you'd like, or join that one. Just simply type in Fukushima Research Group and you'll just ask to join, and they're sharing information that they've gathered. And it's a start.
It's a start.
It's a start.
Well, I think that word of mouth is really, really important. I think that's a great point, being really simple. There's 22 of us here, and starting with each of us individually. And it's about what we do with ourselves and our lifestyle, creating a pure culture of empowerment and talking to people when we go to places, to talk to people about this, like get them to wake up in Santa Barbara, Goleta, Carpinteria. What are we doing when we go out into the world? So it's, the greater picture is great and it's very realistic and that's important, but what are we doing day to day? What are our choices, ourselves? What are we putting in our mouths? What are we saying to other people? Are we going to walk away from this today and tell people about this great group of empowered people coming from many different great backgrounds that came and created a synergistic exchange with each other? There's a lot of great energy here right now, and for this thing to be just a waft of here and a waft of there, it's great, but I really do think it's a lifestyle change. It's about What are our choices that we're doing to detoxify our bodies, to put better food in our bodies, to make smarter choices about the other neutralizing devices that we may put on our Wi-Fi's, or maybe make a choice not to buy an iPad, or tell somebody at the Washington school, maybe you guys shouldn't have those third graders and fourth graders using iPads. That's like a mandatory thing now for the fourth graders at Washington school. The smartest kids in Santa Barbara are being forced to use iPads now. I mean, it's just things like that when we can grassroots. This is a powerful community of the environmental movement. Let's reawaken that in this community. There is a great formula here for that type of movement that can become a global thing. So starting small and being very realistic about our day-to-day, being conscious about our choices and empowered about who we're speaking to, what we're sharing with these people day-to-day. Even making a conscious choice of like, wow, I haven't really talked about this or done anything. Maybe I should say something to the stranger that's in line with me at the grocery store about, hey, are you aware, da-da-da-da. A lot of people don't know about the smart meters. Still today, they do not know about these smart meters, but people are becoming very sick. They're losing their hair. They're having things that are happening to them. People don't realize that even if they do not have a smart meter on their home or their building, they can still experience the radiation from the other smart meters on buildings around them. People do not realize if you plug in something into an electrical device, into an electrical outlet, that device that you've plugged in has become an antenna. So if you have 20 things plugged in a room, you have 20 antennas along with that smart meter that's outside of that building. So that radiation of that smart meter plus all those antennas that have now come into your home that are blasting you. Just even a little something like that. Did any of you know that? A lot of people don't even know something that simple.
And sometimes the circuits aren't even grounded properly in the houses, and they're even further antennas.
Well, a point on that is, there was a recent video of a fellow walking on the beach up Half Moon Bay, I think it was, with a Geiger counter. It got, I think, at least 500,000 hits on YouTube.
In San Francisco.
It was not exactly the correct way to do things.
Right.
But the point is, he got a measurement and people got interested. If we would walk around with an EMF meter that was tick, tick, ticking to describe all those environments, maybe people would pay attention because they hear the noise. The Geiger counter guy, all he did is walk around the beach and it tick, tick, ticked and 500,000 hits.
Right, and so really important for me, it's not to come from a place of fear, it's about educating from your heart. And doing that in a way where we can be calm, we can be easy, we can have grace, we can have peace about our expression of, hey, by the way, are you aware? More about educating people so that they can make their own choices, but in a nurturing and soft way, not in a fluffy way or a way that's so metaphysical that people get turned off. But this is a holistic model. We are living on a holistic planet. And to just stay cerebral about this would be very ignorant of us. And so it's really important for us to really honor the light and the dark in the situation, but to really come from the heart and our expression in the world about what it is that we're talking here, what is the action that we really want to take.
Better probably add to that something. But you have to try to get the possibilities of what is possible to correct this, because the traditional systems are not going to work.
Right.
You're not going to be able to remove these smart meters. On a global level, you have GE doing it worldwide, globally, as part of a whole program for surveillance and monitoring. So unless we come up with some way of interfering or neutralizing or figuring out an antidote for this, you're just spinning your wheel. You can educate someone. Someone says, what are you going to do? Like educate someone about, we just had radiation fallout coming in from Fukushima the last 2 or 3 days from that steam ring. That's happened. Strontium 90 came in. Strontium 90 came in as well as radioactive the last 2 or 3 days. What are you going to do? Then someone, I just came from a patient this morning. She went and got a mammogram on that same day. She got that plus a mammogram. She had the high flow radiation I've ever measured. This is the cumulative effect, what Cindy's talking about. You have a low dose radiation, you have Fuchs, you have ionizing radiation, and you have things that, you think you don't have any power, but you do have the power.
Like a very wise Rinpoche had said to me many years ago, Tibetan Buddhist Rinpoche, he said, there are no problems because there are 3 or 4 solutions to every problem.
That's right.
So we have them, and actually the problem is the solution. That's a permaculture principle. The problem is the solution. Right. So we have it right in front of us. It's just very, very complex. The equation is something that we have to sit and try to figure out.
I want you all to take this one fact in. One of the big problems and the resistances in people is that when you take a cell phone and you place it to your head, or you expose the head to cell phone radiation, 800 to 900 megahertz up to about 2.45 gig, it lights up the endogenous opioid system of your brain, and you can scan this. Now, what that means is that this is an addictive exposure in itself. That means a cell phone is an addictive exposure. Addiction, it's the same endogenous opioid system that lights up with nicotine, alcohol, heroin, crack, you name it, and cell phone radiation. Now, do you think, when we say people are addicted to their BlackBerries, people laugh, right? They think it's like a habituation, a dependency. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. It is a physiological addiction. And what are we doing? Would we give kids cigarettes? You know, I mean, come on. Would we give them alcohol? Would we require them in schools to be exposed to these things? Well, that's pretty much what we're doing with wireless. And for people who are older, and it's voluntary, you know, in the old days, you know, try to make somebody put out a cigarette, you know, that was bothering you, you couldn't do it. Well, today you can. I don't want to wait 40 or 50 years for this. So one of the big resistance points is going to be that people are very invested in what they're addicted to, and these are physiologically addicting.
And they're very emotionally attached to it as well. I can see people say, well, then what do I do, Jennifer? Do I just have a speakerphone? Does that reduce the EMFs, or do I just
That
be
does help.
contact with
So
people
let me
via
tell you the answer to this
computer,
one. Let's go all the way down, the end of the road on that one, because it's important. Leif Salford from Lund University in Sweden wrote the blood-brain barrier chapter in the Bio Initiative. And he was a guy who tried to find a way to get chemotherapy across the blood-brain barrier to help. What he found was that microwave radiation opens up the blood-brain barrier. Good for chemotherapy, really bad for people. Because when the blood-brain barrier becomes pathologically leaky, the blood carries toxins. They cross that barrier where they shouldn't be able to go. They get through into the brain tissue and they kill neurons. You can look at our work. You can see his work. And so then the question becomes, at what levels, right? At what levels do cell phones still make the blood-brain barrier pathologically leaky? That is the question you should ask. Well, we ask it. And your arm is not long enough. Your arm isn't long enough. Now, you may ward off an acoustic neuroma or a malignant brain tumor, a glioma, but you're still affecting the health of the brain, its ability to nourish, to get rid of waste products, and to function cognitively. Why do cell phones make people stupid and forgetful and confused, and their attention goes? Because you're changing not only the brainwave activity, but the physiology, and the blood-brain barrier is one of the places you don't want to breach, and that's what we're doing. If I sit next to this nice gentleman on an airplane, and before we take off, he's using his cell phone, I'm in it. And if you're doing the same thing, Dave, I'm doubly in it. So we have to think about whether or not the solutions that you're going to think of are really going to help or not. And then you need to come back to experts and you need to say, have you thought of this? And if I'm recommending that be a good prevention, am I right or wrong? And remember, lower exposures are occasionally worse. And in this case, the blood-brain barrier is more leaky at 0.02 watts per kilogram than it is at higher levels. Okay? The magic opening door in the brain is at the lower levels. Okay, so those are some of the complications that we face when we try to be smart about what we do.
I heard Vaughn say nanodotes. He was talking about antidotes, but
And
I thought, that's great, that's the nanodote.
well, we're down in the
Nanodote, yeah, nanodote, that's a good one.
I think maybe we'll bring us back. We've been here long. I've been pretty chatty, and I think maybe now is a good time to hand this back to Bruce.
Okay, I'm going to just say, God, I noticed we keep people leaving the room.
And there's no smart people on this.
the-
They're all sitting there extra per month.
Okay, I'm going to open my mouth because I'm the person to blame for getting this meeting together, with Nancy's cooperation, of course. But I'm more than happy to work on a budget to get those guys here, okay? And I've already met with the people of the Victoria Theater who've promised that I could get the theater for very low amount. That would be an ideal environment, seats 300 people. And by the way, they're one of the most comfortable theaters I've ever seen in my life. It's the new one. Any of you haven't been in that place, it's amazing. It's also in the city. The only problem with the university out there is nobody can find a place to park without getting a ticket. And sorry, Dan, I had to say that.
I'm not parking.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
do that often.
Yeah, so the thing is that, but I'm glad to work on that. I did talk with Jeff Green, he's in the executive, and I have been invited to submit for a grant, which could be $5,000 to $15,000 at the Fund for Santa Barbara. I haven't explored all this, and I don't have a whole array of financial connections for doing those kind of things.
Let me say, I'd like to put a plug in for Bruce and the Heartworks group.
Yes.
Bruce sent out some emails, he would like to get support, at least at this initial phase, to help at least fund, the initial phase for the Heartworks program with the 501c3, and really can get the grant situation they need. So any of you that can open up maybe a checkbook and donate a little bit to Bruce and the Heartworks group would really be appreciated right now, right?
Of
Is
course.
that retroactive for the people who bill for it?
Listen, I've received quite a bit of help, but I will, to that meeting, the other aspect of it, Carol Lee, Dean is here from the Hart Productions, Brian's here, Mark's here, people from the film and media industry have interest in these areas. I also, I'm going to step aside something because Mark, I got a question earlier today. Where's the preview of your documentary that you've done for the Gulf War? What's that called on the website?
Right now it's at risingupfilm.com.
It's called what?
Rising Up Film.
Rising Up Film. Okay. We want to see an interesting job somebody's done with a toxin and a health issue. Mark has done an incredible job. It's the trailer that's on there. It's risingupfilm.com.
That's right.
Risingupfilm.com. Okay. As far as the budget is concerned, I would appreciate those of us have event experience could look over my shoulder and critique what the draft, so that what I'm doing is something that
Can I say one thing about that? Just coming from the outside and coming into this blind,
Yeah,
I've been sitting here for 2 hours
yeah.
and I still don't know what you guys are doing. So
Okay.
I think it's important to try to get a message for an event, especially or going forward. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And there was a lot of talk, but nothing really, I don't know what you guys are trying to do. So there's a lot of great information here today. I'm not critiquing, I'm just
Okay.
noticing that.
If I could comment on that a bit, I made some notes prior to the meeting about what I'd like to accomplish. And one of them was to, the need to make at least our community aware of and track all forms of radiation. And also present some solutions and some therapies. I didn't say how to do it, but the idea, the mission, I guess, would be to make at least our community aware of all forms of radiation, and that could be by measuring them or using reports or whatever, and presenting some potential solutions. And Cindy had mentioned at our meeting that her focus, we were talking about research, so well, forget the research and stuff. Let's educate decision makers and the public, which is part of what I just said.
Those are sort of details in my mind. I mean, I'd start and say, okay, if you want to bring a crowd to Santa Barbara, and you've got David G. from the EPA, and maybe Gary Gregoria, and maybe even Leif Salford or Leonard Hardell, who's the international expert on brain tumors, to come over and give a talk about late lessons from early warnings. Santa Barbara's always been about being ahead in the environmental movement. I mean, that's where we all started. We've lost our way on wireless, I'll tell you. But bring it back and let him bring late lessons from early warnings, which has massive appeal to many people. But what the message is that we need to be looking at early mornings, so now we're mid-course mornings. And we can focus on Fukushima and ionizing radiation, chronic low dose, how we interact locally and globally on that, and we can talk about wireless. They could be two focus points with the experts you're bringing in. But I think you're going to need to build this as a place to come and to learn about those environmental conditions which affect everybody today. And we may want to keep it simpler than trying to, we're not going to talk 3 days about treatments, but we need to bring that problem into focus, and there's no better place than Santa Barbara to do that. It's been our root and our history here.
It's like another learning center.
Mark, I'm going to, because some of you don't know the history behind this.
Don't let me interrupt your meeting, but I've got to go. I've got a train I'm going to catch, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
About time. Mark, in 2008, I was brought to Japan to have a conference on critical issues for Japan, which boiled down to the sustainability of the future of the nation of Japan. So I had a task force and a group of people that developed a program for information and educational services on sustainability. In the midst of all of that, what happened is that Fukushima happened. It turned out most of the people working in Japan came from Sendai. They were personally affected by the radiation. One of our guys almost died. Okay. I knew Dr. Arata and a lot of people in alternative medicine. All of a sudden we decided, it was really Dick that said, we need to give a little conference and share our knowledge and our expertise. And Bob was involved in a bunch of it. We just had this little meeting. It was June 23rd, the year before last, and we had this little conference. We thought we had a great meeting to share ideas between Los Angeles and up here. Well, it was something, we thought we did that and then we're done. And all of a sudden, we had over 350 requests for the DVD alone of that, and we had zero publicity, zero papers, nothing. Everybody's trying to keep it on the radar. And we've had 5 meetings since then, so it's been based on education, knowledge, and the fact that we have very close Japanese ties. We help write a protocol to go to the Secretary General's office. So you might say, what this room and this meeting is about is kind of an outgrowth of something that took place well over a year and a half ago that we didn't anticipate. And Cindy, this just happened. Cindy had get together with coffee with Dick and I had laid out all this. And we're like, my God, we've got to do something here. I talked with Carol Lee and you actually earlier on about documentaries and that, and Brian. So for myself, I can't sit by with what the knowledge I have and say, gee whiz, Mother Earth, have a good time. I'm proactive to see what can be done, and that's why I brought everybody here. So that, in a nutshell, is why we're here and what we're trying to do. I hope I'm being.
Yeah, I don't want to be misunderstood. I mean, I think this is a great meeting and great information. I'm coming from the outside, I'm learning a lot. But I did ask myself a couple of times, what are they trying to do? Like, is there an end goal in mind? You can't change all of society,
No.
Is there an end goal here?
Well, the end goal is to try to, and it depends on the scale that we can do practically, is to bring a good scientific meeting together. Dick has some very good ideas of what we could do within this region in terms of monitoring and making more public awareness, as does Jennifer and several others here. And then how can we support properly the creation of documentaries, information with credibly good information. One of the difficulties I've had, and Mark, you and I have had this discussion before, I've talked to enough directors and people who are producing things where they said, write the script, point and shoot and get it in the can by the end of the week. And we've seen so much misinformation go out, some other half-assed stuff. Mark, you're one of the most credible people in those kind of details I know of, is that, and so is Brian, and so what we're trying to do is to support in the media in such a way to get a message out that's accurate and credible and honest. I mean, this sham job that CNN did on nuclear radiation, about a couple months ago, turned out to be a promo for the nuclear industry.
Right.
There's more bullshit going down the media pipeline than we care to think about. And it's happening from a number of different directions, and we're trying to avoid that.
I think I'll give you one example of things we are doing. After that beach video that went on YouTube, fortunately, the fellow that we met at the UN meeting, who is he's been to Fukushima like 10 times, he makes Geiger counters. He's advised us, and we have our Geiger counters here now and how to use them and all that stuff. So there's an organization called SafeCast that was formed by people who want to make the proper measurements using Geiger counting, because a lot of the stuff out there, like Bruce said, is a guy walking on the beach and getting counts. And so if you become a member of SafeCast, you have to meet certain criteria, certain protocol. And I'm a scientist, so that's fine with me. And so I went down to the Henry's Beach here, and I did my own survey. I have a report on it. What happens, like with SafeCast, you have to have the GPS location, you have to have control of the documents, you have to do it right, as a scientist would. So we're going to do that in Santa Barbara, and we're going to go on SafeCast, and when we do that, people will know in Santa Barbara that we have credible data.
What were the readings, by the way, Nick? What did you?
I have them, I can show later after the meeting.
If you could put it in one sentence, his question is like a mission statement.
Yeah.
And Bruce, remember when we had your first Mother Earth media put together? You said something like Fukushima. How do you say it with the emphasis on the second?
Fukushima.
Fukushima and health crisis issues. I think is what he said, just
I like
as
it.
a
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
theme
That's,
for why we came together.
I was thinking, I didn't want to add into this because there's so many people want to talk, but that's exactly what I was thinking, is
Mission statement.
you need a sentence,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fukushima
that's
and the health crisis.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, but the idea again is that's what we've been doing for the last 5
Right,
meetings.
taking
But
it.
Cindy comes along and said it's broader than Fukushima.
Yes, it is. But that's the tag that will, or the buzzword
Yeah,
that
yeah,
will hook
Yeah.
some kind
Fill
of,
the
Yeah,
Victoria.
yeah.
it brings the radiation in.
Cindy literally kicked the barn doors open on what we were doing.
Right.
And
She brought it to
and
both.
it's just happened. I mean, we know of Cindy's work, but she just said, you guys are thinking in the box that big, and I'm thinking of Cinerama. Okay, so,
But every chance you have, as you pointed out earlier, to connect it to Fukushima,
Yeah.
however you say it,
Fukushima.
then it's bringing people into your
Yeah.
issue, because just today hearing, there's all this stuff going on that was a low-level concern, and whatever, high-level, but now because of Fukushima, it's serious, and we're all at risk, and the kids are at risk, and kids on their cell phones. I mean, because of Fukushima, wow,
But I think if we did a version of SafeCast that was for EMF, for her stuff,
yeah.
not just Fukushima, or not
Yeah.
just ionizing radiation, that would be, is there anything like that, Cindy? Is there any kind of, in the ionizing, we have these radiation alert networks like SafeCast and Rad Alert and all those.
Thinking like.
Does anybody have anything like that for non-ionizing?
Well, remember how this happens. Communities are changing their baselines every single day.
Yes.
There's no way for us all to keep up unless everybody, groups have meters and do
Right.
reporting, but it's very location specific.
Right.
It's not a good analog to what you're talking about, but it's happening in a slightly different way.
But it might be somebody monitoring grade school buildings or something.
Oh, yeah, it's very, very specific,
A very
location
specific thing.
There's an opportunity coming up to do something in the community now because there is a discussion, it was in the Montecito Journal, just about, they're proposing a bunch of new cell towers, is it for Montecito? So that's up right now.
This is every community, you want to say.
So is SafeCast but they're also monitoring the whales that are coming ashore, and Fukushima is in there, the word. I mean, so it's different sections or sectors of.
Yeah, Safecast is a world, the whole world, amateur scientists measuring radiation,
The whole world.
meeting to certain specifications. Yeah. Everywhere around the world, I don't know how many sites they have.
Right.
Just go to safecast.com.
No, the Geiger counter though doesn't specify which.
Yeah, that's right. That's another good point.
Okay.
So as part of what I'm trying to do, if we have some sort of lab here to do things right, for example, it was the incident that I talked about up in the San Francisco beach. The guy walked around and he was definitely picking up radiation. But he didn't have what's called a gamma scanner, which tells what type of radiation, energy. And, but our contact, Dan, went there with a gamma spec. And he found that the spectrum was more what are called normal, was it a normal occurring radioactive materials, thorium, uranium, and so forth. And he had the spectrum from Fukushima because he'd been there, and that was like the cesium and the strontium and the xenons and the thing. So he showed that the guy with the measuring Geiger counter was getting radiation, but it wasn't related to Fukushima. Well, we have to do the same thing here.
The government officials say that actually Live was some more, Livermore dumping stuff.
Right, could have been. But whatever it is, to do things properly, we need more instrumentation than just a
Does
Geiger.
Fukushima have a footprint or a DOE footprint that you can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Actually, some people have told me each nuclear plant has its own signature.
And a different type of leakage is produced with different signature too. I mean, depending where it's coming from. Yeah.
Is that like in Masarawa science?
What's that?
Would that be like under the water science that Dr. Masaru Emoto was measuring? A signature?
Oh, yeah, the signature is basically the energy spectrum of the radioisotopes that come that are released.
Is there a practical, budgeted, simple way to go check local radiation levels here and find out if it's signatures to Fukushima? Is that doable?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on, is, let's call it a radiation laboratory. And I sent around to some people, Fairwinds Technology, a guy named Ernie Gunderson, if you know Fairwinds, F-A-I-R-E, Winds. He has a video on there about how to do this. It's like a 14-minute
Didn't that just
video.
come out on Facebook from Safecast?
Safecast is, what about it?
Didn't he just come out?
Yeah, he's
From
a,
Safecast.
he's involved. But anyway, what was nice is that there are several videos telling you how to set up the lab, you know, what protocols. So I've been following that.
And to get the signature?
Yeah, if I had the...
You're in the process of that right now?
One of the options might be to approach, like UCSB. They have a health physics department there. I'm sure they've got this kind of equipment. And to get the community involved, it would be nice to have that sort of connection.
Yeah, that's a key, no, if you pulled that off, you would have all the attention to this issue right here.
If you can measure it, you can manage it, okay?
Well, I'm going to make a suggestion here because Andrea had to drive her dad to the train station. She's coming back. Oh, you're here? Okay. Boy, that was quick. Do we need a blood sugar break? Okay, for boosting blood sugar and brain function. Blood break. And then get everybody get a bite. We could come back and reconvene the discussion. Are we okay time-wise, Nancy, or are you?
It's open.
Also, it'd be nice to thank Nancy for
Yes.
opening up.
And by the way, so you know, I also measured Nancy's stuff here. She's very progressive. She saved her car air filter, her house filter, which by the way I put back in the garage. We have a special, real high-quality filter on her pool, which, so any chemtrails or anything comes down in her pool, when we eventually change that filter, we will measure that. And we measured her dog, Neil. See how radioactive he was, because anything outdoors. So we're building a database.
What'd you find?
She has natural radioactivity.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. There's more radiation coming out of her kitchen counter than anything I mentioned.
That's grand. Yeah. And she paid not to have spark meters.